Hello, beautiful soul family. Rebecca here, your vibe mentor. I am so excited to bring to you a new series where I am introducing you to people in our community, our spiritual soul family, who have experienced trauma, overcome it, and stepped into their purpose. The goal of this series is to help you see that you are not alone in this experience, that many of us go through very difficult childhoods, but we can heal, still shine our light, still make the world a better place through our purpose, and find fulfillment and thrive in the process. Today, I bring to you Isa Lara Marie. She is the founder and ordained minister of Eternal Grace Ministries. Integrating infinity is the culmination of her body of work of the language of light, shamanic energy medicine, psychic integration, and pure presence. She is an international best-selling author and has a book that we will link below that you can check out today. Isa has served as a channel and a healer in service to all that is for over 33 years. Hi, Isa. Welcome to the Vibe Mentor podcast. I'm so excited to have you here with us. It is a pleasure to meet you and to share your story and your experience with our audience. So welcome, welcome.
Thank you, Rebecca. I'm so happy to be here.
Beautiful, beautiful. So tell us more about you. What do you do? What are your skills and your talents and your purpose?
Well, my work and my passion is as a medium and a channel and a shamanic energy medicine healer and intuitive. And I've been doing that for about 35 years. And I also do body-centered counseling as well. Just had such a passion for healing, just anything regarding how we can all heal more deeply.
Yeah, and you have such an amazing and powerful story. So I'm excited to share your story with how you got started and how you stumbled into this and what you've overcome so that we can help our community understand that even though most of us signed up for difficult childhoods, we can still shine our light, step into purpose, and find safety even in shining.
That is so true. That is the way that I got here. I had a very difficult past, very severe trauma, and that really was my awakening and what stirred me and woke me up to this path of healing. And I was actually disabled by the time I was 22.
Wow. Yeah, we'll definitely jump into that. I want to let the community know that you have some freebies for us today. So stick around to the end. We'll be offering some 50% off coupons as well as some free gifts. So lots of healing work that is available through not just your story, but also the gifts that you are bringing today. So do tell us more about your story. How did you end up disabled at 22?
Yeah, by the time I was 22, I had a very debilitating spinal pain in my body and a sort of a fire pain down my leg. And I could only sit for maybe 10 minutes with massive pain. I had to lay down all of the time. And this had gone on since my late teens, early 20s. And I had tried everything in the medical community. I had crossed all the boxes off and done all the testing and all of the treatments. And I was getting worse and worse. And they weren't finding really they were perplexed, like, why is this not healing? And so on one fateful day in Seattle, Washington, I met a person, a new friend who told me about a healer and took me to this healer. And that healer, Lita Rose, she became my teacher. And that day that I met her, I went in for a session and she channeled and did readings, spiritual intuitive readings. And that very day, I had a profound awakening. I didn't realize that I had been dissociated for 22 years, and I started to literally come into my body with shaking and tears and a lot of releasing. And that was the beginning of my path as a healer, that realization of what I was here.
What a common experience too. So many of us have difficult childhoods or traumas in our lives, and we don't realize that we are disassociated. And especially if you're spiritual, we love to meditate and astral travel, and we're constantly going up and out, and we forget to be grounded in our body. And so what caused you to disassociate and brought you to that point?
So I did not realize at the time, but I had something called conscious amnesia,
Mm.
which is a psychological term for when a victim, a trauma victim, has been through, I'm sure you know this, has been through so much trauma that they have to shut out the memory until they're ready to reassociate or begin to process the memories. And so as you said, I was up and out. I was in this floaty, spacey, disembodied state, and my body was really suffering. And so, in this moment of meeting Leader Rose and coming, there was an activation spiritually, like an awareness that got triggered in me in that moment. And in that moment of that session, which truly was fate and destiny to meet each other, I all of a sudden started coming in. And as I did that, in that moment, began to realize that there was sexual abuse. It was like I was flooding with memories of ritual sexual abuse from my childhood, from very young all through my childhood, really until I was about 19 years old. And much of that had happened in a church where I grew up with the pastor and the clergy.
Mm. So it would make sense to try not to see that anymore and not be able to handle that. And it also speaks to, as you mentioned, the body therapy and being able to get into the body. And in my experience, I almost blamed, I think subconsciously, my body for the difficulty or for the pain. Our body does make it possible to feel that, but we misplace the blame, I think, sometimes. And so that justifies our, again, going up and out and away from the body. How did you heal your relationship with your body, having gone through that experience and remembering these things, knowing that the body keeps the score, and having to heal that relationship?
That was a long, dedicated journey. I healed my body by, in that moment, being willing to start feeling and remembering the memories, the emotions, allowing it, not resisting it, and really letting my body emote, shake, sound, everything, express over a for me, this lasted many, many years. And that's not so true for everyone, depending on their different levels of trauma. And at first, I hated my body. I just hated it. I was so angry, at my body. And I did just what you said. I blamed it and I pushed it away. And I didn't want to feel all of that awful, um, really pain and sort of at times almost disgust of what had occurred, because what had happened was stored in my body and it was hard to separate for a little while. But I learned pretty quickly that, oh, this was what happened to me. And it got absorbed and stored in my tissues. But it wasn't my body's fault. My body just did what bodies do. And it did an incredible job keeping me alive,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah, yeah, and keeping you from the pain to some extent too. Yeah,
Absolutely, completely.
yeah.
Yeah.
At what point did you start to learn about the nervous system and gain an understanding that this wouldn't last forever? Because I think that's a very common fear, is that the pain will just last forever.
Yeah, I felt that all the time. I felt that for years. And I would go in waves of that where I would have memory recall and flashbacks and be releasing.
Mhm.
And I would get caught in the memory, right?
Mhm.
It's going to last forever because, as you know, in trauma, it feels like it's going to last forever. It's sort of endless feeling. I started discovering, my nervous system and all of the information about that and dissociation, learning about that really right when I met my teacher in this spiritual awakening moment. That oak cracked me open to this sort of passion of, oh, I have to heal myself. No one is going to heal me. it's up to me and my relationship with the divine to heal myself. And so I started reading, studying, getting therapy, getting multiple different body-centered modalities immediately, as well as energy medicine. And I did this for years and years and years, thousands of hours, maybe even more than that.
But it was worth it.
Was absolutely
Yeah.
such a blessing. It turned out to be my saving grace and such a blessing.
And it is amazing too how our pain becomes the fuel for our purpose. That if we don't do the healing work and we I don't want to say fail, but we choose another lifetime to step into our purpose, then that pain is almost for nothing or goes to waste. And what was that experience like for you when you started to understand that this terrible experience was then going to fuel your gift to humanity?
That's so beautifully put. Rumi has this beautiful quote. He says, "The wound is how the light gets in."
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's how the light gets in when we actually we've cracked. Some of us have cracked, right? And wow, I would say pretty immediately in this spiritual awakening, I recognized I had full knowing. Sort of, you could think of it as like my intuition. I came into my body and it was like my higher self and my intuition just came online. It was like I was online again, finally, right?
Yes, yes.
And in that moment, I have to say, like the first week, I was in resistance. I was fighting. Oh, I don't want to do this. This can't be what I want to do for my life. I want to be a dancer. I always want to be a professional dancer. And I was on that trajectory before my disability.
Mm,
And I resisted for, I would say, about a week of just struggling with God and arguing and like, I don't want this. But I knew, like I could feel it in my being, like this. It's like it almost felt like the universe grabbed me by, like the nape of my neck, like a little puppy, and was like, "You're here to do this." And I felt it. And I would say quickly just surrendered and said, "Okay, this is what I'm here to do. So show me the way." I really wanted to be of service beyond, I knew I needed to heal myself, but I didn't want anyone else to suffer.
yeah.
And I really wanted to dedicate. And so I did dedicate my life to this.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that you say too, you come online, because I had a similar experience, when I first discovered my trauma healing gift and bringing this to humanity, and that feeling of, I don't really want to roll around in the mud all the time. I don't want to be, in the muck, in the shadows of doing the shadow work. And it's not just about that for a long time, spiritual people, especially, we would get stuck in hermit mode under the guise of healing and feel like we could never get out. And
Mhm.
that does not have to be the case when you involve the body and clarify the vessel. You bring yourself back online, like you say, and awaken, right, God within the body. And tell me more about, what did that look like? The reconnection that happens when you heal your body and you kind of clarify the vessel. What did
Mhm.
that look like for you?
I would say that was a very long process for me, only because of the nature of the youngness that I was when the trauma started and how long it had occurred for.
Mm-hmm.
But as I dedicated my life to this, I mean, I had to be relentless. I did all the work. I was disciplined, even when I didn't want to be. And that's what it looked like. It looked like not always just hard work, but definitely focus and discipline and making that my priority. And as I released memory, and I was receiving at the time energy medicine from my teacher, my vessel, my body, and my light body, right? I use that term for the aura.
Mm-hmm.
My light body was being cleared of all this residue, just what I call heavy energy, right? Especially for me, a lot of other people's energy. So I had my own toxic energy from abuse, but and my emotions and everything, but I also had other people's. And I just stayed the course, and used so many beautiful techniques. And the truth is, I could never have done it alone, clarified my vessel. It was grace. It was the grace of God, and it was the grace of the people that I met who literally held my hand in those early days and my teacher.
Such
Yeah.
an important point too, that trauma like this, complex trauma, childhood trauma in general, it's a relational wound where people have hurt us. And so we have a sort of fractured relationship, not just with people, but with God. And especially if it is tied to religion or churches or people who, should be a different way and aren't. What did it look like for you to heal through those relationships, or how, maybe I should ask this a different way, help the community understand the importance of relationships, and that the healing must come from engaging together with others, and healing and feeling safe in relationship, both with people and with God?
Yeah, that was quite a process for me because, as you can imagine, when you've been brutalized and tortured to the levels that I was with people, a lot of it was groups, right? Group abuse. There's a distrust that occurred in me, and I didn't trust anyone. Of course, rightly so. And this is true for many people when they've been abused. And so the first thing that I really had to face, and I'll never forget the day my teacher said, she looked at me early on, in my early 20s, and she said, Isa, you're gonna have to trust one person sometime. And she said, it doesn't have to be me, but you're just gonna have to like make that choice. And in that moment, I had sort of like an energy shift. It really affected me. And I gave her my trust. And that was an amazing moment, actually. And, trauma happens in isolation, right? And we're isolated. That's how it happens. There's no one there protecting the victim. That's why it's trauma. And it's crucial as we awaken and heal that we pick or allow of course, whoever's safe, whomever we've discerned that they are good, they are safe, they are knowledgeable, appropriate for us, that we do begin to nurture and heal that relationship of trusting people. And then really, it does take, in a sense, sometimes a community of practitioners or friends to help a victim heal, depending on their past.
And it is so true that two people or one person really can experience the same exact experience. And if one has a person to lean on or to protect them, that they will not necessarily see the same changes in the brain and body as the person who is alone does. So you're absolutely right. We need each other. We're built for collaboration. And there are literally areas of the brain that will starve to death if we don't collaborate. And it's an unfortunate trajectory that we have been on in the recent decades around individualism and separating from each other and isolation and even faux connection through social media, and to some extent even a hyper independence where I don't need anyone, I'm on my own, I'm good. And so it is important to remind the community the value of connection and relationship. And we were talking just before we started recording, right, where two or more are gathered, there I am in their midst. And so that amplification of source energy is bolstered through that connection. Tell me more about healing your relationship with God, especially since these people were claiming to be of God.
Yeah, you just read my mind. Yeah. That, fortunately, my relationship with God was very separate from the religiosity that I grew up in. Somehow I had this love for God that was just God, right? It wasn't really religion,
Mhm.
even though I grew up in a fundamentalist, Christian home. So somehow that that was pure, or it stayed in my heart, you know? And so as these people of God
Mhm.
were abusing me, and in literally at times in the church space, um, somehow I knew that that wasn't of God, you know, even as a little child. Like it didn't really taint that part of me because I never really fully went into the religion piece, even though I was indoctrinated in that. Some part of me stayed free. But what did occur for me is right after, I would say, upon coming into my body, when I was already disabled by this time that this was happening, I was angry at God. I was so angry at God. I was like, God, why didn't you save me? Why didn't you bring a person or something? You know that one? It's like, and I had to really work with that a bit in my early days. But what I did is I really allowed myself to just speak to God, literally like I am you right now, and have conversation. And over a very short time, for me, I came into just an awareness and a knowing. Just something in me just knew that I had chosen my parents and
Mhm.
these experiences so that I could wake up more deeply, clarify these energies in myself, and offer healing as well beyond myself to others. And so that became very clear quickly, but it was essential that I allowed my anger towards God. And I really went through steps and stages with that.
Yeah, and I know in some of my darkest moments it can feel like we're alone. And but to your point, what you mentioned earlier is that cracking, right? The deconstruction of ourselves, our egos, our mind actually brings about the gift, right? That in the cracking we become more capable of holding more light, and we are rebuilt into something new and better. What was it like to become conscious of the ego and the mind and the illusions and the stories?
You ask great questions. Uh, uh, my mind was absolutely cracked. I really did go through what I would call a felt sense of shattering. My psyche was shattered, and it was the feeling like I was glass back then, and it just split. And I was extremely fractured in my psyche. You know, I wasn't multiple personality. I hadn't fractured to that level, but I would say I was close. You know, I was on the spectrum and I was not what normal people were for sure, like my level of fracturing. And that once I understood, my teacher was of incredible help. She helped me understand what that it was fracturing and why I was like I was and why I had all these voices back then and emotions, and I would be taken over by, you know, these different compulsions or patterns, you know, and I suffered a lot back then. And she really helped me to understand the psyche. And in that time period, in my early years, and that is when I dedicated my life to really learning how to weave my psyche back together, the state of my mind, all these beautiful exiled, what I call parts of my psyche, these younger parts.
Mhm.
I spent my life, you know, learning how to bring them into wholeness. And in that process, I learned a lot about dissolving the ego. Also, at the same time, being able to realize myself beyond my mind, that, oh, I'm something, we all are, right? Bigger than the mind or the ego, right? And what does that feel like? And how do we access? And that's what I've really spent my life dedicated to exploring and learning even more about and sharing with others.
Yeah. Yeah. The conversation around parts is not common. In fact, a few decades ago, people would say, don't talk to yourself, that it was strange if you heard multiple voices, and come to find out we're made of many parts, and we have what could be called inner child parts or protective parts, depending on, what perspective you approach with. And it almost seems to me as though the ego, for me, in my experience, seems driven by a part that is not having a need met, that it is stepping into a more unresourceful type of behavior, trying to get validation or attention or love or whatever it is that part seems to be missing. What has your experience been around understanding parts? And two, tell me if this is something that you've also experienced. I've noticed that the parts tend to be the stakeholders or the key holders to subconscious programs, belief systems, right? So tell me a little bit more about your experience in discovering parts and how that's all come together.
Yeah, absolutely true. I found just what you said to be so true, that the parts are these, they really are running the ego, because just like you said, it's their unmet need that keeps just pushing or trying in some perhaps distorted way, because we're not able yet in the moment to identify and listen and acknowledge what's needed, right? And that's not our fault. That's not anyone's fault. It's like that's a learning process. And it also takes rewiring of all the neural pathways to be able to do that practice. When I first woke up to my parts in my early 20s, I felt crazy. I I can't tell you how many times I said to my teacher, "Am I crazy? Am I crazy? Am I I mean, it would just go through waves. Okay, I'm not." And then
Yep.
and this was first the experience, because what I found happens is that when you wake up that you have some subconscious parts, which we all do on a different spectrum of level,
Mhm.
they get really excited.
Yeah.
They're like, "Oh, they're going to listen to me now. I really need this." And
Yeah.
they all just sort of flood to the surface, and they want your attention and your love and your guidance. And it can be a little overwhelming.
Yep. Yeah. And to anybody who hasn't heard this, it probably does sound a little bit crazy.
It probably does, but it's very normal.
Yeah, yeah. And the parts get louder the more unhealed trauma you have, or the more unmet needs you have. So to your point, in that moment of fracturing and feeling like everybody's screaming loudly, or they're, compulsion, right? This strange urge to go do this thing that just seems unusual is usually driven by a part. And so for anybody who hasn't experienced really loud voices or strong compulsion, you can kind of just take a step back and look at, was there ever a time where you felt both happy and sad at the same time? Right. So we've all had a mixture of emotions, right? Excitement and fear at the same time, right? That's two different parts, right? So there's a part of you that's really excited for the thing that's going to happen. And there's a part of you that probably had a similar experience that didn't go well and says, yeah, but I'm really apprehensive about this. And so you can start to look at it. I like to use the analogy of our entire being as a vehicle, and you, the adult, current, present version of you, your consciousness, right, your highest self, should be driving. And you have a whole bus or van full of these different parts, and when you get triggered or life sends you an unforeseen experience, they jump forward and try to take the steering wheel from you. And so everybody's part of the family. They all have to be welcomed and accepted and loved, and space needs to be made for them, and their needs need to be met. And they offer sometimes some very valid, creative ideas, but ultimately we have to be at the steering wheel. So just to clarify for anyone who doesn't understand parts work, this is based in psychology. It is scientifically proven. So this is a very healthy thing to start to understand who your parts are, what their needs are, and listen to them, because they are trying to help you heal, even if sometimes they hold beliefs or perspectives or programs that are not necessarily serving you. So feel free to add to that. I just thought that clarification might be necessary.
It's very necessary, thank you, because some people don't think in this way. And in our culture, that's been a little taboo, like you said earlier.
Yeah.
But really, the truth is that I see it as a spectrum. So we have a spectrum of, say, there's an ideal state where someone has no parts, which honestly, I haven't seen that,
Mhm.
but it's possible. And they're just coherently kind of one unified field, right, of the mind. And then you just have a little bit, and then it's a little more, and then you get it all the way till you get to something like, MPD, multiple personality disorder, right? Which is the extreme. And most people, they're just over here on this spectrum, right? Unless they've had very severe trauma. And just like you said, it's that feeling of like it can be very basic things that bring it up. Like part of you wants to go on a trip and part of you doesn't. Part of you wants to stay home. And in those moments, that's what we're referring to, that, it can be just simply that's the difference of the parts. And that's very, very normal. And I think being able to bring this up and talk about it in our culture is honestly incredibly powerful and healing. And it may help people to realize that they're not crazy, that this is very normal to have confusion sometimes and inner conflict.
Yeah. Yeah. And healing can help bring you to a more integrated state.
That is right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Beautiful. So
Yeah.
speaking of integrated states and that inner chaos, right? As we calm the inner chaos, that's where we're talking about clarifying the vessel and being able to receive more guidance. And I know that you also offer some education around intuition and receiving guidance, and help us understand the sort of the segue or the junction point between receiving guidance and hearing the divine that lives in our body, and the trauma healing and how that facilitates that.
Mm-hmm. So, what I've found with most people in my private practice of 35 years is that most clients or people who've been through severe trauma, they're incredible channels,
Mhm.
or they're incredibly psychic or intuitive, right? Or even just a little bit of trauma sometimes because they had to vacate their vessel. They had to just leave, and all these violations, or whether it's emotional, physical, or sexual, hit their system and they had to leave. And in that leaving, where is there to go? When people leave that space, often they are in a dissociated state, out of body, and they are sort of altered into often like a higher realm as well, and often have, visitations and experiences with angels and guides, because the nature of that is sending them forth in this way. And so most people who have trauma, have this skill, right? Now, that being said, you don't have to have any trauma to be able to access your guidance, your intuition, and what I call your higher self or your galactic self.
Mhm.
I found everyone has an innate ability to access and get that clarity and those channels, those inner channels opened, of how they can strengthen and open access to their guidance and their intuition. And we really all have that capacity. Now, sometimes people who've been traumatized, they can get too cracked open too quickly. And I found these people need help with embodiment, grounding, getting in the body and getting contained. And that is the kind of help I needed back in my early 20s, really just getting here. And so it's just important to remember that if you have that kind of history as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I loved sort of bringing together, because I was also raised in a religious home, and bringing together some of the biblical statements and in understanding our perspective towards our body and how that may need to shift. In the spiritual community, they'll say my meat suit, right? I just want to go home. They want to leave the meat suit behind and just go back to the stars, wherever we came from. And yet, the ancient teachings will tell us the kingdom of heaven is within, or the body is the temple of the spirit, or the body is not your own, that it is divine, that there is wisdom that comes through the body. And I think having a shift in perspective around that can help us come back into the body and understand that the body is the vessel or the conduit through which we receive that guidance, that the emotions, the sensations, all of that is an important piece of healing that relationship and being able to work with the divine here in this realm. When did you first start to notice that you had healed enough that you were receiving more guidance through your body?
As soon as I met my teacher and
Mm.
I came in, that channel fully opened for me. It was like it was already there, but it was sort of like beside me or offline because I was out and I was disconnected.
Mm.
As soon as I came in, that higher faculty was absolutely powerfully opened. And so, even though at that time in the past I had very fractured states of confusion and working with parts, I had extreme spiritual faculties happening.
Mm.
Psychic visions, channeling, mediumship. I was channeling and still do guides through my body.
Mm.
That was happening kind of simultaneously, actually, during that time. And I love this statement that I keep hearing, you know, that I say this often. We really can't go home, home meaning all that we are, until we welcome everything within us and around us, that there really can't be judgment or resistance. Really going home is an allowing and is in a state of love and welcoming. And so it's sort of all connected in that way, right? And requires eventually being brought in to the field of love.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I could not agree more. Especially as a little girl, I would stare up at the stars. I felt something similar. Like I felt like I want to go there. And I didn't know what that meant. I was 5 years old, the first time I recall doing that. And then after trauma healing, I realized that the home that I was seeking was within, that you come home to yourself through that healing. And the phrase home is where the heart is. It's literal. It's physically literal that you find that home and that safety within your body, and that can feel so difficult to achieve for many. But just letting them know it's possible.
That's right. It really can. And I understand that too, because I had that too, wanting to go to the stars to where I was from. And I had that even in my early 20s of the healing. I would go through resistance and then acceptance and back and forth, just kept wanting to leave. And we often have that because sometimes what's living in us from our history is too much.
Yeah,
It's like a process. We need support with that, right?
yeah, absolutely.
Much. Yeah.
Yeah, and you've referenced this a couple times, and I feel like it's worth mentioning that there are ebbs and flows, right? So there will be moments of peak experience, peak emotion, peak pain if you must, but it won't last long. That there's just like a contraction, right? And sometimes I feel like healing trauma tends to be a lot like giving birth, that there is this squeezing moment that is difficult, and then there's a release. There's moments of reprieve, and so we all have that window of tolerance that our brain and body will keep us in, and so it's not going to be all at once. It's not going to be too difficult.
That's right. And that's such a good point. And also, even during times of work or discipline or focused work of healing,
Mm-hmm.
there's bliss. There can be states of bliss and happiness and
Mm-hmm.
euphoria. And what a blessing that we get these waves and it's
Yeah.
not just all hard, you
Yeah.
know.
It's not like the bucket is dumped on you all at once.
Oh, there is too much grace in the universe for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. So, what has been your experience around learning that the body and trauma affects our ability to manifest?
Oh, that's a good one. Well, what I really discovered about that one is when we have unconscious parts that we might not be aware of,
Mhm.
but maybe it's showing up as anxiety or anger or irritation, but we're kind of like, that is often what is creating unconsciously our manifestation, as you know all this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I found it crucial. I call it, bring everything in, bring everything to the light, like welcome, go towards,
Mhm.
with gentleness and ease. And if you need support, call in a therapist or a healer, but go towards,
Yeah.
because if we embrace some heavy emotion that we have and we bring it into the light, then it's not running the show. They did studies psychologically. I've read this several times where 90% of our behavior is unconscious.
That's
And
amazing.
I don't know if that's like exact, but I have read many studies over the years where at least it's a very high level
Hmm.
of unconscious. And so that means that we all have to get curious and go, what's that little feeling that I keep pushing away? And how is that affecting? I keep wanting to manifest a house, but why is that not happening?
Yeah.
Maybe there's something unconscious that is actually affecting that. And I found that to be true over and over again.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
can clarify that, of course, right?
Yeah, yeah. I never set out to be a manifestation teacher. I wanted to help people step into their purpose or heal their trauma, but come to find out, we're all creators creating all the time. And so you really can't avoid this conversation. And then the understanding of the unconscious parts, either tampering with or preventing our manifestation, really, shined a light on the need to talk about that. And it has it came to my awareness that in creating a business, stepping into your purpose, especially if you have any desire to coach or be a healer or have an online business, you will have to have relationships with people. And if you have trauma that is a relational wound, you are likely going to struggle with being able to draw those relationships into your life and feel safe in them. And so I love that you mentioned moments of bliss, because as I would discover some of these subconscious parts and realize, oh, that's why the business isn't growing, there is a moment of, yes, like the bliss of excitement that I found the thing that has been preventing me from moving through this. And so trauma healing, again, like I was saying, it's not just about rolling around in the mud. It is clarifying the vessel, receiving the guidance, connecting to the divine, healing relationships, and then stepping into purpose and limitless expansion when you start to be able to navigate the subconscious parts that is 90% of our life. It's crazy.
Absolutely true. And I've even found in that as we heal the trauma, we change something that I call our energy signature.
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes we get a signature of energy that says victim
Mm-hmm.
or unworthy. And we don't realize that our history has created this sort of signature structure, crystallization in our light body.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what we're emanating unconsciously to the universe.
Yeah.
And so, as we heal the trauma and heal the parts, we are clearing and cleaning our light body, right? And our
Mm-hmm.
being inside. And then we're clearing our signature and our emanation so that we can emanate what we want to manifest,
Yeah.
right? And then it just flows so much easier
Yeah.
when we're able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's more about putting down any resistance that you might have than it is actually trying to manifest. It's allowing the manifestation, really. And another reason why the body's important, right? That it all starts in there and then emanates out through all of the different bodies and becomes your magnetic point of attraction.
It is so true. I call it turning on your receiving.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to do anything. It's like you just have to shift that doing mode or thinking mode to like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I'm allowing, I'm receiving.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I receive what I want. And I found to have gratitude and an open heart really helps people to receive, right? And just to let it
100%.
come to you like you're a magnet.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. Beautiful. So what are your top tips if you were to meet someone new who is just getting started? What are your favorite 3 tips that you give your clients?
Anything in general?
Any top 3 tips, whatever you'd like.
Oh, okay. I would say focus on and nurture your connection with the divine within you, the God self, and the divine everywhere around you. And as you're doing that, take some of your energy out of the world. So, what I mean by that is Don't let the world have your energy. Keep some of your focus inside yourself in your center as you're moving through the world in this deep connection with the divine. And in this way, you can be in the world. I know people have heard this, in the world, but not of the world.
Mhm.
This is a shamanic perspective, right? And this is empowering, and this will help you hold your chi, hold your light body. Your energy is your chi, to hold that and to have this sovereignty. So that's, I guess that's the first thing. That was sort of a long
Well,
one.
yeah, no, it's good.
And the second one would be, love your body and work with embodiment.
Mhm.
Check out if you're in your body and just see, like, ask yourself, like, am I in my body? Can I can I feel deep, like I'm resting deep down in? And am I in that most of the time? And what pulls me out? When do I dissociate? Most people dissociate little ways throughout the day, right? Little tiny things, not just necessarily leaving their whole body, but spacing out. And so just asking this and focusing on kindness and love and how you can connect more deeply and listen to the body and love the body and get in. That's my second one.
Beautiful.
All right, third one. One more?
Sure. If you've got one more, I think you have many.
There's one more here. Let's see. Sometimes we wait for it. Trust yourself. Don't
Mhm.
listen to your mind. Don't listen to doubt.
Mhm.
And really love yourself. Be kind to you. I think this is one of the biggest obstacles when people aren't compassionate to the self, to healing and awakening. We're so trained to love others and do things for others, and we're selfish if we focus really too much on the self. There's a bit of that enculturation, but love yourself, trust yourself, and don't listen to the doubt or your mind. And give yourself the love like you would to a friend who needed your help. I've found that to be life changing with all in all the world. Totally life changing.
Absolutely. And they're connected too. That sometimes we have a sense of, I need something to be okay. And then we don't trust ourselves. We don't give it to ourselves because we're not certain that that's okay or that's right to ask for. So beautiful. And certainly trauma can cause us to not trust ourselves. So
I would say that is one of the biggest pieces that trauma victims deal with, that I dealt with as well, is
mhm.
I had lost all trust of myself because that's what we're taught when we're violated consistently or abused or taken advantage of. We're taught to vacate and not trust ourselves because we couldn't.
Yeah,
We had to give in or comply. And that reclaiming that mechanism is life-changing, self-trust and not following the doubt.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So if somebody would like to work with you, how can they do that? What products and services do you offer?
Oh my. Lots of different kinds of options. I do private sessions, and that's just a matter of contacting me on my website. And I do, it can be anything from, body-centered psychotherapy to channeling or intuitive readings or mediumship if you have a deceased loved one. It could be shamanic energy medicine and healing, healing any kind of trauma or just bettering your life in some way, improving something that you're working on. And then I also have a lot of like free resources on social media. I have a lot of links that I'm sure you'll list, and Facebook and LinkedIn, and there are many videos that I post for people because I want to empower people. I've also created, on top of that, just recently, a channeling course called Demystifying-channeling,
Mhm.
help people to really not just channel like an entity or a guide, but to really be able to access their guidance, your own guidance and your higher self. How can you refine that and connect in. And so I'm offering the 50% discount on that until Valentine's Day. And I have many courses and classes on my website, as well as a membership to my body of work called Integrating Infinity. And so a great way to just get connected with me is just to sign up for my newsletter and receive a free transmission meditation. And that's a really good way just to find out what's happening and what resources are available as well. I also want to just say, Rebecca, that I wrote a book.
Yes. Yes. Oh
Yeah,
my gosh. Beautiful.
months ago. Yeah.
Mm.
And this is called First Light. Not sure how well you can see it.
Yeah.
And it is Reclaim Your Life, Your Power, and Your Destiny. And it really is the story, part autobiography, part teaching, how I healed myself. And
Beautiful.
it offers a lot of resources about how to heal and how to awaken more deeply. It's very inspiring. It's not dark and gloom. It's actually quite inspiring. And if you feel called, you can also receive that and read my book.
Yeah, we'll absolutely list all of the links below for anybody who wants to connect with you through your website or to get that free transmission and meditation, as well as the 50% off. There will be a code listed below for all of that. Your website, I believe, lists your book. So if they're interested in purchasing your book, they can find that there as well. And I do have to say, you're one of my favorite interviews of all the people that I have met with. And I highly recommend all of your products and services. You are obviously a very genuine, beautiful soul. And so I'm really grateful for you being here and sharing your energy and your story with us. And I'm sure that book is nothing but a gift of the divine. So I highly encourage anyone who is interested to pick that up. Any parting thoughts that you would like to share with us before we break for today?
Oh my. Thank you so much. Just thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to meet you, and I'm so grateful for our connection. And I just want to say to everyone listening, just don't ever give up.
Yeah.
There's always resources. And if you need that support, you can reach to Rebecca, myself, or anyone else that you're drawn to. And just to never give up. And to really know that there is a grace, there is I found the universe to be very benevolent, and there is a grace that you can access, that can come into your life when you just simply ask for that and sort of stay focused with that prayer.
Yeah. That's a very important message. I think all too often we can feel like a man on an island. That only I feel this way, only I struggle in this way, only I am alone, people don't like me, or whatever the beliefs are that your trauma has caused you to adopt. You are not alone. You are not alone. And it is incredible how consistent the experiences are when you start to meet people who are like you. The belief systems and the isolation, the seclusion, the pain, the wounding, it is all very common, surprisingly. And it is that isolation that causes us to feel alone. And so come to find out, the number one most Googled search question as it relates to God is, why does God hate me? And
Oh,
I find that sad that there are so many people who feel that the universe is not benevolent, that God somehow has chosen them to isolate and punish. And so if for some reason anyone out there has that belief that, well, Isa can do it or Rebecca can do it, but I can't, really, really challenge that, because if we can heal and step into purpose, so can you. And it is simply the very shifting of that belief that God is benevolent, the universe is benevolent, that will open the doors for you and put a crack in that belief system that keeps you stuck. So thank you for reminding us to never give up.
you're welcome. And also with that, just that you are worthy, you are lovable. Everyone is lovable and worthy.
Yeah.
Every single human and creature and being,
Yeah. Without exception.
without exception.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, soul sister. And so much
Thank
love.
you. Oh, such a pleasure to be with you.
And you too.